Alright, so we're going to do this day 2. I'll move in a second. This day 2 of the essence of Shabbos. And today what we're going to basically do is we're going to go through the 6 days of creation. And then we're going to see how Shabbos is the completion of all that. And then we'll start really looking in detail in the Shabbos. But I want you guys to understand the 6 days of creation. Alright, so we're on day 1 right now. And what we said that's incredible about day 1 is the Torah doesn't call it Yom Rishon. It doesn't call it the first day. It calls it Yom Echad, one day, because at that point, the only thing that existed, Hashem, existed before the creation of the universe, but the only thing that existed is Hashem, and then everything that Hashem created on that one day. And that day is the only thing that's existing, that 24-hour period. So on that first day, in essence, Hashem created everything. But we're going to see it. He created it in a state where it's not physical. It's all ruchnius now. It's pure. It didn't come into the physical state. And we're going to see how the whole process of creation, it goes from complete ruchnius, something that's completely spiritual, and then it starts becoming more and more physical as it goes down to each level of creation. We'll do a little intro into how the aspect of creation works. All right, so the Bereishis Rabbah, it's from chapter 1, it's 19. It says, something very interesting about the first day. So it says, on the first day Hashem created the raw material from which he constructed everything in the world. So everything that was ever going to exist, Hashem created it in its purest state. It was all created in its purest state. It was created in a pure ruchnius state. There's nothing physical yet. So even though, we said before, like day 1 is, here, let me just put it back up. So the most important things on day 1 of what he created, Hashem created the whole heavens, right, the earth, and then one of the most important creations is light, and then we have darkness. So I'm just going to put this heaven, earth, and light right now. So these are the important creations on day 1.
What does he mean by heaven? He means the various materials that comprise all the stars?
All the stars, all the galaxies, all the planets, everything that's up there. And then, okay, so then the Bereishis Rabbah goes on, and it says, from the first day, the sun, the moon, all the planets, all the mazalos, the zodiac. So these are, and it means all the stars and galaxies. It means everything up there in Shemayim, everything up there in heaven. The mazalos, the zodiac, is a very special placement of stars. And Hashem has them placed in 12, you can like take a band in the sky and it's the zodiac and it's placed there. And then each month, Hashem, as we saw yesterday with the spheros, the 10 spheros, Hashem sends his infinite light, the Or Ein Sof, through the system of the spheros. And that system is, we'll see a little more when we start getting into the stars and the Rekiim, more specifically how that works. But Hashem sends this infinite light through the system. That influence comes through the mazalos, it comes through these stars in the zodiac, and then it has an influence on every month. So every month is tied in specifically to a specific mazel. What's so fascinating is, we're in the month of Av right now. We're heading up to Tisha B'Av very quickly. So does anybody know the mazel for the month of Av? So it's actually Aryeh. It's the lion. It's Leo the lion. Is the special mazel of Av. And you would think that would be like the opposite, right? The opposite of what the mazel should be for this month, because the 2 temples, the 2 Beis Hamikdashes were destroyed on the 9th of Av. But it shows what the month of Av is really supposed to be, because one name for the temple was called the Ariel, the Lion of God. And really, in a sense, the mazel of this month is not really the destruction of the temple, it's really supposed to be the construction of the temple. It's supposed to be quite the opposite. It's the temple itself. This is the month of the temple itself. Okay, so, but everything is now in its pure spiritual state. So even very physical things, trees, grass, the Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, Gehenna, everything's existing as pure matter without any form. So we talked about yesterday, this is like there's the elementary particles, like what makes up protons and neutrons, they call them like quarks, up quarks, down quarks, and they're the same size as the electrons, and then these quarks make up the protons and neutrons, and the scientists say this is the basic building block of the universe. The Torah is saying, and the Sod of the Torah, the Kabbalah, is saying that really the building blocks of the universe are the Hebrew letters, the 22 Hebrew letters of Lashon HaKodesh, of the holy language, and those letters, we saw that yesterday, the pathways between the spheros, and they have the ability to hold this infinite light. And then Hashem builds everything. Those are the building blocks. So that's the great mystery. I mean, how all the physical things are created from, light and the letters. That's the big mystery. That's the big secret of Maaseh Bereishis. We're not going to get too deep into that. But just for what we're learning right now, everything's existing in a pure state. It's in a spiritual state, not a physical state. And it has no form. So nothing's been formed together. Everything's there, but not solidified. I mean, it's probably not an accurate depiction, but if we kind of imagine, like let's say there was a castle, right, and it's all misty. So everything that's going to be in the castle is all misty, and it's not solid. And then through the next few days of creation, Hashem's going to solidify everything. So then that castle is going to become physical and not just spiritual. It's maybe not a great mushal, but try to give you guys a little bit of this deep concept. So then, on the following days of creation, Hashem formed and changed the matter, which was to comprise each entity, everything that's going to exist, and then it becomes the object that we now know. So on the first day, everything that's going to exist is created, but it's still in the spiritual shape, or no shape, actually, it has no form, but it's all there. Like the root matter for everything. And we're talking now on a spiritual level is there, and then it's going to become the physical object. So on the first day, the heaven, the earth, the light's created, darkness created. We saw those 10 things that were created yesterday. So everything's created, but it hasn't, not everyone's come into its physical form. So I just wanted to go real quick to give you a little bit of idea of how this works from the different levels of creation. So these are actually, these are actually worlds. So the world of Asiya is where we live. This is called the planet Earth, right? And this is the physical world we live in. And then as you go up, so the Malachim, the angels live in this world. The Kisei Kavod, the throne of glory, which we talked about yesterday, is in the world of Berea. We'll talk a little bit like Gan Eden's there now, I believe. The Kisei Kavod's there. And then the world of Atzilus. Okay, so just how does it work? Okay, so the world of Atzilus is a creation of Atzila. It's the word Atzil. It means it may be an ayin. I forgot if it's spelled with an ayin or aleph. But it means it's next to Hashem. It's very close to Hashem. So this is now things are in a very Hashem's purely spiritual. Hashem's not physical. Hashem's infinite. Yet Hashem has no parts. Like we talked about yesterday when the Torah is talking about like the hand of Hashem, like let's say the right hand. It's really referring to that Hashem's acting through the sphera of Chesed. He's acting towards the world in a loving, kindly way. Like we just saw this horrible earthquake, 8.8. It was massive. So that means like Hashem's working through Gevurah. He's working through din and judgment for whatever reason. It's like for whatever reason when these things need to come in the world, Hashem's working through that. That's the left hand of Hashem. So Hashem doesn't really have hands, but it means he's working through this system. He's working through the system. He's created the Tselem Elokim, the image of a man. Okay, so Atzila means, if you can think about it, like if you want a mushal to think about it, like there's the sun, so there's the core, there's the essence of what the sun is, and then the sun starts to give off this radiation. The sun starts to give off this heat, right? It starts to give off this light, and there's things that are radiating or emanating from the sun, but then it becomes not the sun itself, it becomes what's coming out of the sun. So too, this level of creation, this means it's much, much closer to a creation of like Hashem's like essence. It's something that's radiating off of Hashem, coming out of Hashem. but not Hashem himself. I think one mashal they use is like the glass blower. Like when the glass blower blows his breath into the glass, the breath, if you think about it, it's coming inside from inside the glass blower. It's something that's in the glass blower, and then the breath. So the breath is not the total component of a person. The breath's something that's inside a person, but some essence of the person is coming out in his breath, and now it starts to form and create something. It starts to create the glass. The air is going into the glass, and it's forming, right? It's forming that. So that's the highest level. That's like the highest level of creation is like this tzila, this emanation from Hashem. Okay, so these are hard to understand. So I think it could be saying that the creation on this day, even though it does use the word bara, but it could be like this, the first day is this kind of level of creation, where everything's created, it's just emanating out from Hashem, but it's not, it's nowhere near physical yet. Okay, so the next level is Bria, the world, and this is literally translated as creation. Now this is the concept of yesh me'ayin, creating something from nothing. So nothing was there before, and then Hashem creates it into something. Now, these are deep concepts. We're not going to go too far into this because we do want to get to Shabbos. And then the level down from that is a creation called Yetzira, formation. So now forming is when you take something that already exists and then you form it into something else. Okay, and none of these are really like the physical malacha that we're doing here. So everything down here, all the 39 malachas, all the creative actions we're doing down here, are at this lowest level of creation of Asiya. So I'll give you a great example. So we're purely just working with what's already made. This is a deeper level. I mean, this is where, let's say if we're talking about like, subatomic particles, they don't even exist yet. And just like whatever substance that they're going to be created from, now that substance is formed. Then talking about the substance can become whatever. Now forming, let's say the subatomic particle. Now there can be formed. Now we can work with them down here. So to give you an example, so let's say we want to build something. So we go to a tree. We didn't create the tree, Hashem grows the tree. Maybe we planted the seed. So that's a physical, creative malacha we did here. We did a creative act, planting the seed. We water it. That's the malacha of Zoreya. It's growing. But we didn't really create the tree, right? Maybe we helped it grow, but really Hashem's the one that created the tree. But then what we could do is we could take the tree already exists, it's completely formed, all the molecules, all the elements, all the atoms are in there already. And then we could cut down the tree, and what we do is we change the tree, which already created, already exists, and we cut the tree into boards, and then we build those boards into, let's say, a house. So that's the lowest level of creation. That's what we're doing on Earth. That's physical creation. We're taking everything that's completely formed, completely created, and then we can change it into something else. Like you're going to take some clay, make it into a pot. The clay already exists. It's everything's there. It's created. We can change the form of it. Yes.
Emanation is the seed.
Emanation is
the seed.
It's the glass blower. It's like the essence of Hashem. Like it's something coming in from the essence of Hashem radiating out.
But didn't he need the glass? Then the sand before.
Hashem created the glass. I know it's an imperfect analogy, but it just gives you a little bit of an idea of this.
Okay, so the emanation is the glass blower.
Yeah.
And then creation is the glass?
I mean, these are imperfect analogies, but just to give you a little sense. And I don't want to get too wrapped up. We're going to get to day 2 soon. So, okay. Yeah. Before everyone's heads explode.
Since you have the physics background, I'll give you another imperfect analogy.
Yeah.
Sounds like, what was I going to say? Probably it's not a very, what's the term? Randomlessness.
Yeah.
What's the term?
Oh,
E.
Entropy?
Yeah, entropy.
Yeah, entropy.
Okay, so entropy, the idea of entropy is that everything's in a state of randomlessness or chaos.
Yeah.
in life, even non-living things, basically are the block of entropy, putting everything, it's like the reverse of entropy, reversing the chaos.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to see if there's an analogy here.
Right. So no. So so on the first day, we talked about it yesterday. We're not going to talk about today, but Hashem created tohu, which is defined as chaos. So that's like the material that can become matter,
Right.
but has no form to it. So and that's what we're really talking about here, tohu. And bohu was created on the first day, water and wind, which we talked
So
about.
tohu,
Yeah. But tohu is chaos, entropy, and then the whole purpose of creation is going from tohu, is going from the chaos, going from something that's not created, not formed, but the raw material, to seder, to order. And that's our job. Our job is, to bring everything into order. And that's the whole goal of creation, to return it to the Gan Eden, to the Garden of Eden, the Garden of Delight. And one of the most important things when we get so close to it, when we have the greatest potential for it on Pesach, right? To break out of the mitzarim, to break out of the physical and the spiritual constraints, and then when we're so close to it, and the day with the greatest spiritual potential of it, and then what do we have? We have a seder. Right? We have order. We do 15 things. 15 things is the gematria, the number of the first two letters of Hashem's name, Yud Hey. And we have a Seder. We do 15 things on the Passover Seder, Pesach Seder. And that's where we're getting really close now to Geula, revealing Hashem in the world. That's where it's the potential there the most. Okay, so day one, it's very deep. We're not doing a whole class on day one. We got to get to Shabbos. But we want to go through the whole process, and I think we'll appreciate Shabbos more that's completing the process. We want to get a little taste of the process. And the rest of the day is going to be mystical enough. Okay, so everyone, can I raise this? We're going to go to the second day. Okay, we're going to go to the second. So now, this Yom Sheni, it can be called a second day because now two things exist. Now there's a first day that existed, and now, so on this day also, the Malachim, the angels are not created until the second day, which we'll see. So it was just Hashem, only Hashem himself, because it's day one, and there's only one Echad, there's only one Hashem, so it's only Hashem on day one. And then everything that's going to exist is there, but it hasn't been fully brought out yet. Right? So it's probably the highest level of creation on day one, and it's hasn't been brought out yet. Right. It's second day, but I'm just going to call it day two. Right, so let's take a look at day two. Okay, so the main things that are formed on day two is, let's see, I didn't write it out. Okay, so we'll go through the Rakia first. So the Rakia is created on day two. And we're going to take a look again in Bereishis Rabbah, the Midrash on Bereishis 4:1. The Rakia, and that's one of the trickiest words, was immersed in water, just like the earth. And Hashem commanded he said, let the Rakia become stable. Okay, so now some things are becoming more physical. And let me just put this other part up and then we'll go. And then next Bereishis Rabbah, let's see. And this is 4:2. And it says the water above the rakia. Evaporated. From the heat of the rakia, which is fire. And this water later condensed to form rain. All right, so this is all very confusing. So let's see if we can bring it.
The original water cycle.
All right, let's see if we can all bring it. Let's see if we can bring it a little back down to earth. A lot more than that. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind through the first 2 days of creation. Now we said on the first day everything's there, but everything's in a purely spiritual form. Nothing's physical yet. Second day, things are starting to become more physical. So there's four main, what's called four main yesodos, four main elementals. And believe it or not, even science agrees with this, and we'll see how. But if we picture it on the first day, so here's the earth. So just picture the earth. Now remember, it has no potential yet for plants, because that's going to be on day 3. So it's just a big ball of dirt. And here's another amazing thing. The Midrash says that this big ball of dirt was perfectly smooth, right? Perfectly smooth. So there was no mountains or valleys yet. It's just a ball of dirt. And it's perfectly smooth. Now, you would think like, oh, science is not going to agree to anything, as crazy as that. But yet, science, what do they call this big ball of dirt? You know the answer?
Big ball of dirt.
What's the big ball of dirt called? Same with sphere. Okay.
Sphere.
So it's called the geosphere. Even scientists are going to say the Earth is the geosphere.
Well,
Big. Okay.
further up is the biosphere.
Okay. So
This
big.
is just geosphere.
Okay, so big ball of dirt. Right.
This was created on the first day then.
Right. So everything's so it's in a spiritual state, but now it's becoming more physical. So now we have this big ball of dirt, but there's not going to be mountains and valleys until day 3. So we have this big ball of dirt, and then we have another sphere around this big ball of dirt. And what is this called?
Yeah.
And the scientists call this one
The biosphere.
the hydrosphere, which literally means the sphere of water. Now you're right though, the biosphere.
Is where life is.
So when everything's done, life on the earth, they're going to call it the biosphere. On the crust of the earth, where we all live, they're going to call it the biosphere. But we're just going through the elementals right now. But on day 1 and 2, so on day 1 it's purely in a spiritual state. Now it's becoming more solidified. On day 2, the earth is all that dirt, but it's just a perfect smooth sphere. And then there's a sphere of water that's covering it, right? And then just to give you guys a little more feeling of like how everything is on the earth we live in, then Hashem created another sphere. This is the famous one, the sphere of air. Anybody know what the sphere of air is called? Everyone knows. Everyone knows what it's called.
Atmosphere.
The atmosphere, right, which means a sphere of air, right? The sphere of air. So the atmosphere.
By the way, each of these days, how long are each of these days?
24 hours.
No, seriously.
No,
Oh.
24 hours.
How?
There's a lot of people, but they were actually 24 hours. Yeah, a lot of people get into the whole, they
How
wanna,
can Rebbe, how can you be so categorical? It's,
there's different. Okay, I'll say that there's different aspects of it. But the Peshat levels are 24 hours.
at the shot level.
Yeah. Okay, so then there's a sphere of fire, and the scientists even will admit that they don't say it's a perfect sphere, but our tradition is the perfect sphere of solar fire radiation. Anybody know what this is called? What's the Van Allen belt? See, they don't. They should be. I don't know the Greek or Latin word for fire. but it really should be the pyrosphere, right? It really should be this. It really should be called the pyrosphere, right? If we want to be consistent. But they just call it after the scientists that found it, and they just call it the Van Allen belt. Now they don't. I believe I mean, Rambam says this is a sphere. Sifrei Kabbalah says this is a sphere. They want to say that the Van Allen belt kind of comes in, you know, because of magnetics. I think they may be wrong. I mean, they're probably wrong. The Sifrei Kabbalah says they're wrong. But this is, okay, so this is right. But just to keep in mind the second day, we have you know, the sphere, the big sphere of the earth, and that's completely covered with water on this day. Okay. So now we got to get into this very complicated topic of the rakia.
So it's covered with water, but there's underneath dirt, soil, what?
Oh, so what? So remember, we're not going to get to plants. There's no plants yet, right? So, but the potential for all that's still under the soil, but maybe not even there yet. I don't know. But the Midrashim say that it was a perfect, smooth, just sphere of dirt. That's all it was. There's no valleys, no mountains yet. And then the water completely covers it in a sphere of water. And now remember, that's what the Mabul does. The Mabul returns it, you know, turns it back into its original state. Now the water again completely covers. I don't know if it became smooth again, but the water completely covers like the dirt now, right? So the Mabul just brings everything back. Okay. So these are the four Yesodas, the four elementals. And then we get into the Rekiim. So the Rekiim are also spheres, but they're spheres made out of some kind of clear spiritual material. And according to this midrash, there's some kind of energy, there's heat, some kind of fire that these are made out of, right? And here we see a sphere of fire, some solar fire that's completely clear that we can see through. Okay, so and the Gemara says there's 7 of them. So how does that relate? So if you remember yesterday, we were talking about the spheros, but the universe, the spheros can be in 2 different patterns. He uses them in 2 different patterns. So we saw yesterday, if they're in a pattern called Yosher, we saw how they're in a form where they look like a man, and that's called the tree of life form, right? But the spheros can also be where Hashem creates, let's say like this is Keser, and that's one sphere. And then inside of that sphere is Chachma, and inside of that is Bina, until you get all the way down to Malchus, and there's a little tiny earth inside everything. So the little tiny earth is the sphera of Malchus, and then it gets physical. And then these spheres, so the 7 lower spheres, right, are you know, the 7 Rekiim. So what's called the 7 Rekiim. These are spheres that are dividing, and I believe each sphere is dividing between like upper waters and lower waters. It's very, I don't want to get too into this concept, it's a very deep concept. So the Gemara says that, and it's in Rambam, it's in Yesodei Torah, and he calls them the Galgalim. He calls the spheres the Galgalim, and he then explains the layout of the universe. Basically, like you have the sphere of Earth, around that you have a sphere that the moon, you know, is in going around the earth, and then it's going to be different from Copernicus's model. I believe the next sphere is going to be Mercury, then Venus, then the sun, right, going around the earth. Not what Copernicus said, so that's a whole big issue. But then Mars in the next sphere out from the sun, and that's interesting because when we really look at Mars looks like a planet that's next to the sun. Mars looks like a planet that's very hot. Desert, right? It looks like a planet that's right next to the sun. And then out from Mars, then we have Jupiter and Saturn. So those are the spheres, and then you start to go out the next sphere from that, and then you get into the spheres with all the stars, galaxies, constellations, you know, and the final sphere is called the daily sphere that just rotates the whole thing. So that's the ancient model. Copernicus, you know, he may have confused the world. It's quite possible he's confused the world, but we don't want to get into all that right now. So these are spheres, these are Rekiim. Now the lowest one is called Vilon.
So let me just.
Oh yeah.
you invoke the planets.
Yes.
So what is their level of development on day 2? Mars, Venus, Jupiter,
Okay, so they're not going to be placed until day 4.
the day.
So we're gonna get to where Hashem's placing everything in the orbits on day 4. Now they're there in whatever state they were there on day 1, but in some pure spiritual state. Now also we're gonna see too. We're gonna learn a little more about the heavens, Shemayim, what we call outer space. The rules are very different there. So they're not. Once you leave the earth, you're every time you go up a sphere, things are becoming more spiritual, more ruchnius, less gashmias. So here down on earth, everything's physical. As you start to go higher and higher up there, things start to get more spiritual. They're less gashmias, less less like how physical like we know here. Okay, and so let's talk about this. So the lowest rakia is called vilon, which means a curtain. So one way it's described in Midrashim is that it's like a veil, and this will be what's causing the day and the night. Like if you think about like a curtain, you block the light, and then it's all of a sudden it's dark, and this veil is being used to cover up the earth and bring day and night on. And it could be two things. So I've seen it described that it could be, we can look at it one way as it could be, I'm not sure about this, but it could be that the lowest rakia would be somewhere in the atmosphere, would be the first rakia. And it's possible in a sense of like, when we look at it, like what's happening, we have the lower waters of the oceans, right? And then we have the upper waters of the clouds. So it's a separation of those waters. And then the whole process of evaporation and rain, precipitation. Okay, but that could just be just a physical model to give us an idea, of how how it's working. And it could be that the really the first rakia would be right what's being called, let's say, like this Van Allen belt or the pyrosphere. I want to suggest it could be that that's the rakia. And that works very, very well with the second Bereishis Rabbah we have. And this is why it's tricky. It's very tricky working with Midrashim. You're not completely supposed to take the Midrashim literally all the time, but yet there's deep, deep meaning in them, right? So we also don't treat them like simple stories. But a lot of times you cannot take them literally, but there's deep meaning. So it's not so easy working with Midrashim sometimes. But what it's saying here is this. What's the meaning that's coming at it? In the Bereishis Rabbah 4:1, that the rakia is formed in the water just like the earth. So this rakia is somehow in water, and then Hashem commanded let the rakia become stable. So now it's becoming more physical. So we're more physical, like we're less spiritual, more physical, towards the physical. And there's some kind of formation going on there in day 2. Now here's very interesting. The water above the rakia evaporates from the heat of the rakia, which is fire, and that water later condensed to form rain. Now the Al-Sheikh, let's see, I'm feeling a blank on his sefer right now. The Al-Sheikh, I think it's Derek Moshe, I'm just blanking, Devar Moshe, I forgot what he calls the sefer, but the way he seems to be describing the rakia, would from our perspective would be something like this. Let's call it the Van Allen belt or the pyrosphere, because we're saying it's something that it's heat, it's hot, and he's kind of describing in a sense of like all the physical waters down here, like here there's going to be all the oceans and the rivers and the lakes, the hydrosphere, and then in the atmosphere we have the rains and the clouds. But the way he seemed to be describing it is like all this down here is the lower waters, the physical waters, and the first rakia is then dividing between let's call the physical waters, between whatever waters are in outer space or the heavens in Shemayim, and those waters are ruchnius waters. And the difference between a ruchnius water and a physical water, I don't know. You know, it's I don't know. I think it's beyond science to describe it, but it's the pure whatever material makes the water. It's a pure form. Yeah. Yeah.
Can we spend a couple of minutes? I'll get to Van Allen Bell
Yeah.
where I want 2 cups of coffee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Geosphere
Yeah.
is with air.
Okay, so geosphere.
Is that the air that we
So a
breathe?
geologist, what does the geologist study? Geo, I think it means earth. I forgot exactly what it means. It could mean dirt. I think it's earth. Right? I think it's earth. Dirt, earth, Adamah, you know. Geology. So what do they study? They study the rocks, the minerals, everything coming out of the ground. They study like what's inside
is
the
the
earth.
ground.
What's inside the earth. The big ball that we call the earth is made up a lot of dirt, a lot of minerals, a lot of elements inside it. That big ball, that sphere, the geosphere. Then on top of it is a big sphere of water. We call it oceans, right? Or the hydrosphere. Now on day 2, there was no mountains, continents. There was no, there was nothing above. The geosphere was not above the water. That's going to be the actions of day 3. Creations of day 3 are now going to be pulling up some of the geosphere above the hydrosphere, right? That's not there yet. But you can still picture it today, because even if you go down to the bottom of the ocean, what's below the ocean, you got all the dirt. You got the bottom of the ocean, which is the geosphere again, right? You're back to the dirt. And you have all that water covering it. But now there's other places on the earth where Hashem brought the land above the water, because if Hashem didn't bring any of the geosphere above the water, we have no place to live, right? Unless we're going to be in boats all the time, right? But He made place for us to live, so we didn't have a place to live. Okay, then atmosphere. So the Rakiyas are very mysterious topic, but you can look at it. We can look at it a purely physical Rakiya. If the bottom Rakiya is in the physical world, it's very simple to understand. Lower waters. All the oceans, the lakes, the rivers are the lower waters, and the upper waters are the clouds, But that's all physical water. Now the Al-Sheikh wants to suggest that even the lowest Rakiya is dividing between the lower waters, every physical water that we have, and then the upper waters where it's a ruchnius mayim now. It's a spiritual water. So here it works well with this, because it says the water above the Rakiya evaporated from the heat of the Rakiya, which is fire, and this water later condensed to form rain. So it works well, and then it doesn't work well, because that seems to work well with like the clouds or the upper waters. I don't know. I don't want to get too deep into it. This is like many classes in itself, to understand the Rakiya. But it's giving us a little bit of sense of what's happening on day 2. And we'll go a little further here. Let's see. We'll go.
Just one comment.
Yeah.
Science has caught up a little with the Gemara,
Yeah.
because the prevailing view, I don't know, 100 years ago, there's no water in outer space. There's no water in outer space. But now we know from meteors and other things that there is indeed even more water in outer space than is on Earth, in the oceans of the world. So there is
Okay, so there is evidence now. There
is strong evidence that there's water.
Okay, and so that could be right. So if there's physical water up there,
Right.
you can find the physical water. The challenge that science is going to have is there's no instrument that's sensitive enough to measure spiritual water. That's going to be the problem. So that if there's a lot of spiritual water up there, there's no instrument, and you may not even be able to see it. So that's where it gets a little tricky. If all your experiments are with physical, you don't have the equipment. You don't have physical equipment to be able to analyze the spiritual. That's where it gets tricky. That's where it gets really, really tricky.
How many Earths are there?
Earths?
We're just talking about here one Earth.
Just one.
ball.
Just one.
How many does the Bereishis say there is additional Earths? Many of them, or just one?
No, that multi-universe thing.
Yes.
That whole multi-infinite universe thing.
Yeah.
To me, it's complete sheker, because it's the Cinderella effect.
What do you mean?
Not Cinderella. It's the, what do they call it? The who was the one with the bears? This bear's too big. This Goldilocks. They call it the Goldilocks effect. What the scientists have found, that the precision of our world, our universe, is so precise that the distance from the sun to the earth is so precise that if the earth was slightly closer or slightly far away, you can't have life. And everything is so precise. You know, they're going over it all the time with the math. And it's not just that distance. Another extraordinary thing is the size of the sun and the moon and the distance of the sun and the moon from Earth are so precise that they're the same size in our sky, where the moon can cover the sun and the sun can cover the moon. That starts getting into dangerous territory for the scientists, where they have to say God, they have to say Hashem.
Why?
They don't want, because they call it now like intelligent design. You know, the people that are arguing against evolution, because the more they're learning, they're seeing that the creation is so precise that it couldn't happen any other way. So since they don't want to go to God, because God doesn't fit very nice into all the formulas, it doesn't fit nice into calculus. There's no formula for God in calculus. So then they want to keep playing around with calculus. They don't want to put like God constant or something in there, right? And you can't put God, and God, as we said, is infinite. You can't put him into a finite calculus mathematical formula. So then the only solution is like, oh, well, this universe is perfect, but maybe instead of an infinite creator, there's infinite universes. Because you got two choices now. Either you got to admit that there's an infinite creator that created everything, or you just fall back on infinite universes.
So you're essentially saying that NASA and the U.S. taxpayer is wasting billions of dollars trying to find life on another life form like ours.
I mean, we're going to see there's a lot of life.
Well,
There's a lot of life in the universe. No, there's a lot of life in the universe which we're going to see. We're going to see very soon. But I don't know. I mean, what the government's wasted billions of dollars on, that's almost infinite. That's the closest we get to infinity in this world, maybe. I don't know. Now, but that's experimentation too. I mean, some experiments are going to be wrong. I mean, sometimes you got to look, and it's not going to be the way you think, and then you learn.
Yeah, of course, I understand.
Yeah. So
Can I make one defense?
sure.
You dropped something in there subtly.
Okay.
The evolutionists, it's not a denial of God, it's a denial of the mechanisms that are described in the timelines.
Right.
You're not denying, an evolutionist would not necessarily deny that all the pieces were put in on day one.
Yeah.
But he might say, how long was day one? And did the pieces come sequentially? Or or was man created in the last minute on day 6?
Right.
See, these are the issues. Not all evolutionists are going to deny the existence.
Right. I would say this to throw a peace offering.
That is not.
Okay. I don't want to go into that. Okay. I don't want to go into it right now. But to throw a peace offering to the evolutionists, I would say that their theories are this. They're looking, as you say, they're looking for the origins. They're looking for the truth. But I would say this. I'll say this. Their theories are still evolving. Their theories are evolving. They're getting more and more evidence, and then
Okay.
Okay. Would you accept that, or? I can't get caught up on
No,
this.
I know, but
Arthur,
Yeah.
there's a book called The Mismeasure of Man.
Can I mention two things?
Yeah.
by the way, I
You
want to
said
make
something
All right,
like,
let me say one thing. If we're gonna get to that whole, let's talk about it on day 6. Let's get people. We haven't even got to
That's
people
the
yet.
last
Let's get to day 6.
let's
And,
get
you said something
Let's
interesting.
get the
You said,
all right.
we have physical mechanisms
Yeah.
to measure the physical level, I guess, around the earth. But then you said we don't have physical mechanisms to measure the spiritual. What does that mean?
There's no instrument. There's no device. There's no machine that can record or study the soul. Right? Because it's spiritual. It's something that's not physical anymore. And physical. There's no physical device. You can't even see.
I look at spiritual as in a la la land, It's like you have to measure spiritual.
the instrument may not be able to detect
You can't
a
detect
matter, but it can detect the
spiritual.
consequences of that matter, of that spiritual.
I'll if you give me 1 second.
Someday I'll tell you the
I'll
story
give you a
about
quick.
Cape
I'll give you.
Van Almdel.
While I'm writing, I'll give you guys a quick idea to think about. Okay.
Right.
So Rabbi Moshe Heinemann, so he gave an example to us of what's ruchnius. because it's very, what is it? So he said, you want an example of ruchnius? A thought. When you're thinking, it's pure ruchnius. It's pure physical. You can't, it's pure spiritual. There's no device that can record that thought, play back that thought. It's in your neshama. It's in your chachma, your bina, your das, right? It's pure. I'll just leave you with this right now. A thought, thinking, is purely ruchnius. It's not physical. It's not
Yeah,
physical.
versus measuring the Van Allen belt.
Yeah, but that's still physical. We're saying that's
physical.
Right, that's still physical. But beyond that, now it starts to become more ruchnius. And we're gonna see why. We're gonna see the rules change. The laws of physics change. They're not the same anymore. And we're gonna see it right here. So Shemayim, heaven, right? What we call heaven. Shemayim. Shemayim reveals the secret of the substances. We're still on day 2 of the substances from which it was fashioned. So So Shemayim is made out of fire and water. We're going to see that the Malachim are made out of fire and water. We're made out of the lower 2. But we actually have all 4. It's why we're called a little universe. We actually have all 4 inside us. We have, skin. Our skin's made of all the same elements that are in the ground, right? So we have the solid, we have the Adamah.
Some of them, not all.
All right, but some, not all the elements, but certain organic elements, right? And then we have water inside us. We have liquids and fluids inside us. We have breath, right, inside of us, and we also have heat. We have fire, right? We have chemical fire inside the stomach, but we have some kind of electrical, neuro, impulses, going through our bodies. So we have fire. So we have all 4 elements. The elementals, the Yesodis inside of us. That's why we are a little universe. Everything the universe is made out of, we have. But the rules change because we're mainly made out of the ground, the elements that are in the ground, and the elements that are in the water. We do also aspects of the gas, the gases and the energy. But we're mainly made out of, like the elements in the ground. We're mainly made out of Adamah, ground, dirt, soil. The Adam from the Adamah. And water. The Malachim, which we're going to introduce ourselves to soon, they're made out of fire and water. Now, Shemayim itself, the name Shemayim, is a hint that's made out of Aish and Mayim. It's made out of water and fire. So in Shemayim, or the heavens or outer space as we call it, the laws of physics change. So the laws of physics, inside the pyrosphere, the Van Allen belt, under, the Van Allen belt, right, under the sun, as Shlomo Melech, King Solomon calls it, Tachas, Hashemesh, under the sun. There's laws of physics here. Once you get out there, once you go past the Van Allen belt, the laws of physics change. Okay, different laws now. Fire and water can be put together to create things. You can't do that on Earth. What happens if you put fire and water together?
Evaporates water.
Yeah, either the fire evaporates the water or the water puts out the fire. The laws of physics down here don't work like that. But up there in Shemayim, now all of a sudden fire and water can create things. Right? Different. Very different.
Okay.
Very different. Okay, so let's take a look. So
Where we call it waters, it's the same,
yeah,
molecular formula.
then we get into that other tricky topic which you're bringing up, which is good,
Which is a different kind of water.
which is a great question, because now it may be a mayim ruchnius.
Right.
Right, now it may be a spiritual water. So spiritual water and spiritual fire, right, can maybe combine. Where here they can't. That's good. It's a very good question, right? So now up there the rules, now the laws change. Now the laws change because there's a difference. There's Shemayim and then there's the Aretz. Two different things: physical world, spiritual world. And they're not the same. The laws change. But what's the main law of how they're all being formed is the Torah. The Torah is the blueprint. So we have the 4 Yesodos down here. We have earth, water, air, fire, physical, and then up there, same thing. And I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't know. And then it's all formed from the light and the letters, and it's the very deep concepts. Okay, so Shemayim itself is it hints to that, and then there's a spiritual component to it. That, let's see. So fire is din. So water. Back to the spheros. Water is related to kindness. And that's our sphere of chesed, right, which we saw yesterday, our sphere of chesed. And then, anybody want to guess on fire? Fire burns.
Anger?
Well, no, fire is, so anger is the opposite of chesed. It's the dark kalipos, the citric. But fire is din,
Or din.
right? Punishment, or, and that's related to gevura. That's the Sephira of Gevura. And so Esav's like the dark side of this, Yitzhak's the holy side of this, right? Gevura.
Don't you see Shamayim as something infinitely, just an infinite distance away from the earth?
Oh,
You're making something out of Shamayim.
okay.
But isn't it something infinitely, an infinite distance away from the earth?
See how long it would take to get there.
It takes infinity to get there. I mean, Shemayim is, how do you relate it to water and fire?
Even Shemayim has 2 parts. It's divided into 7 Rikiyim, but it has 2 parts. This is where it gets even trickier. So there's Shemayim. Now what I was saying is, it's getting more spiritual as we keep going up and up and up. But this level of Shemayim, even though the rules change, it seems like there's still some physicality to it. And I'll explain why. Because we can look through a telescope and we can see the light, coming, from the planets and stars. And how are we doing that, right? Because there must be some physical aspect to it. There must be some physical aspect to it too in the level of Shemayim, the heavens. We can see the stars and planets of the solar system. We can see distant stars. We can see the galaxies, right? You can look, because it's just the light. So it must be some kind of also physical light coming from them. There's spiritual light coming from them. But then, when we get to the level of Berea, where the Kisei Kavod is, where the throne of glory is, when we get up to that world, now all of a sudden I believe we entered Shemaya Shemayim, the heaven of the heavens, right? And now we can't see this. You can't look through the most powerful telescope and say, oh, wow, there's Hashem's throne, Because now when you go high enough, beyond, so this is probably what we call the known universe, and this is what's beyond the universe. This is, and there's no, and when you get to purely Ruchnius, it's very interesting. In physical dimensions, how things are close together is space, how close you are to something, right? Just physically. If we're nearby each other right now physically, so we're in the same room. Once you get to a Ruchnius world, this is very interesting. It's no longer a physical distance. Things that are close are things that are similar. Things that are far away. So in a Ruchni, once you get into level Ruchnius, so why is Gehenna farther from it? Hashem's everywhere, right? Hashem's infinite, Hashem's everywhere. But in a sense, the neshamas, the souls that are in Gehenna, are the farthest away in a spiritual world from Hashem, because they're acting least like Hashem. And then the Siddiqim are closest to Hashem. And that's why they're described right now in Gan Eden, in the spiritual world, as they're right around the Shekhinah. Because they're close to Hashem, because they're following Hashem's Torah. So in a spiritual world, you're close by being similar to Hashem, and you're farther away by being less like Hashem.
How can you define something physical like Shemayim
Yeah.
that doesn't exist?
That's the whole
Good question.
difficulty about outer space, and it does seem like it's got to have some physical component to it because we see it, but this we cannot see. When it gets pure, the more pure, spiritual ruchnius it has, then we can't see it anymore.
So when you say Shemesh Shemayim,
Yeah,
how would you define it in English?
heaven of the heavens. I could find. I don't.
Shemeh, wait a minute, Shemeh is heaven?
Shemayim is heaven.
No, Shemayim I got.
So Shemay of Shemayim, it's a what's a construct word. It's like Shemayim of Shemayim. So in Lashon HaKodesh is the grammar of how you say the heaven of the heavens.
We're trying to define physically something
To give
that
you-
is spiritual.
To give you an idea, so when we look up into the sky at night at the heavens, right, they're above us, right? But when you're up there, let's say you're the farthest reaches of the known universe, what's above that, right? What's above that? The world of Berea.
The
What's
unknown.
above that?
The unknown.
What's above that? Even so, just like the heavens are covering us, then in the heavens, what's covering that? And that's the heaven of the heavens, like something even more elevated and beyond that, right?
So
Alright.
yes, maybe
Yeah.
just a side question.
Okay.
So many times when we read about a human, a Navi or whatever, wants to consult with some, let's say his former teacher in Shemayim, or to consult with the angels, says he goes to the heavenly courts and then comes back. So how do you conceive a temporary travel to some distant place and then the return back?
Right. So that's
How is that
manifested?
manifested?
Okay, it's an excellent question. Okay, so we all visit every night the lowest levels of the soul. So there's 6 levels of dreams, right? And we're probably I hate to say it, but we're all probably visiting the lowest level, number 1.
Yeah.
But when we dream, we're at the lowest level of the spiritual world. And what goes up is our ruach level of our soul goes up. And that's why we get the ruach ra when we come back down. Our ruach goes up from our physical body. I know that's why it's called 160th of death. And it goes up from our physical body into 6 levels of dreams, but we're probably at that lowest level. But in that dream, you're seeing, you're hearing, you're speaking, but you're not doing anything physical. You're seeing spiritually in that dream. You're hearing spiritually in that dream. You're speaking spiritually in that dream. But as the soul is more purified, like so for a Navi, when the soul's really purified, then that spirituality, because the dreams are kind of like, it doesn't seem as real as this to us right now. We're more locked into the physical right now. So our dreams don't seem as real as this when we're in that spiritual world. But to a Navi goes into a meditative state. So he's like conscious dreaming. And his neshama can go higher and higher into these spiritual realms. So Yechezkel got a glimpse of the world of Berea, the Kisei Kavod, but it's clear to them. It's like the dream is just as clear as like our existence in the physical world is here. Their existence in the spiritual world is just as clear. So, right, so just as there's yeshivas here, we're in a yeshiva down here, in Yeshiva Shalmaila, there's yeshivas there. So a purified neshama, like yesterday, the York site for the Arizal, his neshama was so purified that when he dreamed, his ruach could go very high into these spiritual worlds and was allowed to actually enter and it was just like he was learning in the yeshiva during the day. He was learning in the yeshiva at the night in these high spiritual realms. But unfortunately for us, our dreams are. It doesn't seem as real. You're kind of in the dream and it seems real, but it's not as solidified. That's what we're talking about day 2. That's solidifying. But even the spiritual reality can become realer. But we're so tied down here. It's hard for us to get that. Get it so clarified up there, Okay. So there's 10 groups of angels total, but 5 groups were created on day 2. Okay, and then we're not going to get into demons, or we may. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so angels. So there's 5 groups that were created on day 2. All right, 5 groups, and we're not going to get so far into this because we got, as I keep saying, we got to get the Shabbos, but we're getting a taste of all this. All right, so 5 groups on the second day. Uralim, Malachim, Ophanim, Seraphim, and the Chashmonaim. Okay, so let's just briefly go into this. Okay, so we said yesterday 10 spheros, 7 lower spheros are the midos, the emotions, and so ideally we're attaching ourselves to the Sitra Kedusha through learning Torah, doing the mitzvos, and we're just on the front side, the holy side, the Kedusha side of the spheros. Unfortunately, right, sometimes people they do averos, and they're attaching themselves to the klipos, the shells blocking the light, and they get into the fire side, the din, and there's punishment, right? So there's punishment on the din, the avera side. Now the gevura is the sphera that helps us have control, self-control. That when we build gevura, like Yitzhak, the holy side, gevura, is meaning it's the 365 mitzvahs lo taseh. So the 365 negative commandments, negative mitzvos, are teaching us how to strengthen Gevurah. Everything the Torah says not to do, we strengthen Gevurah. You wait 6 hours after you eat meat before you have dairy, you strengthen Gevurah. But you don't do malacha on Shabbos, you strengthen Gevurah. Like we talked about last time, the mitzvah not to seek revenge, not to bear a grudge. Every time you do that, you're strengthening Gevurah, and that's Sor Meirah. So 365 ways to turn away from evil. Then, kindness, Hesed. So the Torah begins with Chesed, right? Avraham Avinu, the beginning, the root of the Jewish people is all rooted in Chesed and kindness. That is the 248 mitzvahs Aseh. What the positive mitzvahs, the positive commandments, what we're supposed to do. Every time we do one of those mitzvahs, we're strengthening Chesed. Right? Great example, Tzedakah. Why is Tzedakah so powerful? Tzedakah is so attached to Chesed. It's so powerful attaching to Chesed. You can even, overcome the Malach HaMavos, overcome death. Right? Tzedakah is so powerful. So 240. So Sor Meirah, the Gevurah helps us turn away from evil and Osei Tov and do good, and that's Chesed. Right? All right. So that's fire and water, and so Gehenna. So unfortunately, right, a person that doesn't build the Gevurah enough, not taking advantage of the 365 enough, like they may have to still purify their neshamas of some of these averos, and there's 7 levels in Gehenna. Just as we say there's 7 Rekiim, there's 7 levels of heaven, but it kind of makes sense if we think about those lower 7 spheros, right? And the spheros or the midos or the emotions, the feelings, and when they're not used properly, when the midos aren't used properly, and a person, wasn't turning away, whatever. So the Gehenna is purifying whatever needs to be purified in those 7 levels. Whereas a person in Shemayim, then the soul is elevated to the level that they elevated in that way, to the level that you osei tov, that you did good in the world, then the soul's more elevated. So in these 7 Rekiim and these 7 Shemayim, we're not going to go into that right now, but 5 groups of angels were created on day 2, and then I think the next 5 were created on day 5 with the birds. We'll see that. I don't know much about the Uralium, and unfortunately I didn't write down the Hebrew spelling, so I don't know much about this group. This group we're familiar with a lot, the Malachim, and it's the messengers. So we see them a lot in the Torah, like when Hashem sends a Malach to do a mission, to deliver a message. The Nevi'im, Hashem sends messages through the Nevi'im. Moshe Rabbeinu was on such an elevated level where he's like, he didn't want Klal Yisrael to have to speak to Hashem through Malachim. Right? He's like, Moshe was like, Hashem, I want only you, to lead the Jewish people. I don't even want this lesser level of contact where Hashem sends a message through a Malach and then the Malach delivers the message to the Jewish people. Like we see it with Yeshua ben Nun. Like Hashem sends the Malach to deliver a message to Yeshua ben Nun about you need to be learning more Torah while you're fighting this war. But Moshe was at the highest level, right? And the Malachim, so they're the messengers. The Ophanim are these spheres, some kind of spheres. I mean, once again, spheros, the great spheres and they're considered the wheels of the Merkava. Just as a chariot has wheels, these kind of spheres inside of spheres are these kind of angels called the Ophanim, motion, whatever. I don't purely know their role. The Seraphim are a type of angel, soref, burning. They now maybe a spiritual fire, but they look like they're burning with this spiritual fire. And then the chashmalim, so that's what we call the modern word for like electricity, we call chashmal. But these angels, some kind of electricity, lightning, sparking. We can imagine a little bit of the physical electricity. And these have some kind of these made up of spiritual electricity. And this is very exciting. This is day 2. This is the one day that Hashem does not say ki tov. He doesn't say, it's good. Right? He doesn't say tov is good. He doesn't say good because, unfortunately, it's a day of separation. Right? And it's a day where he had to solidify Gehenna. Right? And that's against he doesn't want to do it. That's against the whole blueprint. That's not Hashem's ratzon. It's not Hashem's will that people rebel against the Torah and have to be punished. It's not the ideal. And so this day of separation between so any separation, any machlokus, where we don't have shalom, right? So this is a day that's really going to contrast with Shabbos, where we could put it. So this is the day that's not good because it's the day of separation. But when we finally get to Shabbos, whenever that is, we're going slow, but it's good. But when we get to Shabbos, then it's a day of shalom. Then it's a day of completion, and that's the day. And that's the goal. It's the goal. It's the olam haba. It's the
day of shalom.
1,000 years of shalom.
The day of shalom, not tov.
Shabbat shalom. Well, tov also, and also kodesh, and also holiness. So it's everything.
On the second day.
No, Shabbos. I'm saying Shabbos.
No, I'm talking the second day.
No, second day is the only day that Hashem doesn't describe it as tov.
No tov.
Yeah, right. Because you would have to describe Gehenna as Ra, right? Because it's where Ra is being purified and the Ra is getting out. But it's a place, unfortunately, that's needed for the people that need to get the Ra out. Right? The Gevurah, the 365 mitzvahs lotas, that helps us stay away from the Ra. That's the more we do it, the more we stay away from the Ra. All right, so this let's stop it here. We'll take a little break, and then we'll continue on.
Hollywood set. Yeah.
Okay, so we're back on day 3. We can get into that subject on day 4. Okay. So I don't have a lot of midrashing for day 3. Right, I wasn't planning on spending this much time on all the days, but we're leading up to Shabbos. So day 3 is going to be now the potential of all the vegetable life, the plant life, the class of someach. There's 4 levels of life. There's domain, which means silent, which is all the rocks and minerals in the ground. There's the next level of life is called a someach, like a zemach, a plant, like growing things, right? That the plant life is the next level of life. Then there's the level of behema, right? Of chaya, like domesticated animals, wild animals, and we're also seeing how everything's. So we really see that the domain, the silent, the minerals, the elements are created first, because they're created first, and now they're created on day 2. Now on day 3, we're going to see that this is the day of the plant life, right? The plant, but it's not fully going to emerge until Adam Arishon, until Adam prays for it, until tefillah, to pray for the rain, to get it to start. But all the potential, all the plant life is being created on day 3. And so we saw on day 2, right, the fire and water, right, of Shemayim, separation, the fire and Gehenna. Gehenna actually, it's interesting. The Midrash say that Gehenna has two parts. There's a fire part and an ice part. So once again, fire and water. The cold, frozen water. Like, so you think about that too, it's very deep. The cold, frozen water means the Torah in that person's not flowing, right? The Torah is compared to water. And when the Torah is frozen, it's not being used, it's not being, learned or applied, it's frozen water. You just freeze the Torah, and that's one part of Gehenna. And then the fire, too much of the Aveira, the overstepping. Okay, but now we're getting to plant life. So now all the trees, all the grass, right? Now this is going to be, right, so if we had a geologist in here, they would be flipping out right now on day 3. And I don't have a lot of midrashim to back me up because I didn't prepare, for this so much to go into it. But remember, the first day, everything's in a purely spiritual state. Second day, now things are solidified. So now we have a smooth ball of earth, the geosphere, and above that, perfect sphere of water, the hydrosphere. Day 3 is now there's a place for human beings to live. Because now what Hashem's done is Hashem, in that 1 day period on day 3, Hashem's taken, now he's pushed up the land above the water in certain places, so we have the continents, and now he's like Hashem's like playing, with the earth, like I don't know, like Lahavdil, like a person plays with silly putty or whatever, but he's shaping the earth, right? So this is where science is going to argue. I can say it's a long-term process, but every mountain, every valley, things can be reshaped somewhat over time with erosion and volcanic eruptions, but the main form of the earth, all during this 24-hour period, all the valleys, all the continents. There is an interesting thing with, just getting into that, the scientific idea of Pangea, where everything used to be one continent. There is an interesting potential to see it in these Pesukim here. Because Hashem says he's gathering the water in one place. So if we look at the earth, right? So what's interesting is if we did have one kind of super continent before everything, and then gathering the water in one place would be, ocean and land. Right? I mean, so that's the interesting idea of the Pangea, where all the continents look like they could fit together. So if it really was like this, I don't have definitive proof either way, but if it was like this, and you could see it in that pasuk, and gather the water in one place, then it would imply that the land also was gathered in one place. Then I think what would have happened is when the land has split, I think it would have been the Dora Flaga. It would have been the Dora Flaga, where Hashem now separated everyone to different nations, to different languages, and maybe Hashem even split like the land into the different continents. And if that really happened, what would be very interesting about that is if it really happened that way, it would be very interesting because it would explain how, where like the Aborigines came in Australia, the American Indians, like the Aztecs and the Mayans. It would be very interesting because they would have been in that split, and then they would have been caught off guard, had very little contact with the rest of humanity for a while, and developed those cultures really separated. And that could be, it's an interesting thing to look at. I don't have a lot on that, but if it did really happen that way, it could explain a lot of things. Of like, yeah.
I want to point out,
Yeah.
I'll call it subtle, just to be nice.
Okay.
A subtle difference between what science is view. So the Rebbe said that all the elements and everything, which we say 92 natural elements,
Yeah.
hydrogen to uranium, were all put in place.
Yeah.
And then the plant life evolved, came about. Sorry,
Created.
the E will.
Created.
No, so anyway,
Yeah.
I told him about Francis Collins, very religious evolutionary biologist at NIH. Anyway, the scientists, because we don't account for anaerobic Earth. Anaerobic Earth says that life forms started out in the absence of oxygen. So we have examples of bacteria that actually don't require oxygen. They're called anaerobes as opposed to we're aerobes. And the idea, where did oxygen come from? Oxygen didn't come from the earth. Oxygen came from the plants who developed photosynthesis and took water, H2O, and split it and released the oxygen. So the aerobic environment came after the anaerobic environment due to the emergence of plant life. So there was an element that presumably wasn't there before plant life existed, and that was called oxygen. It was a split of a water molecule.
Right.
So we don't, I don't know if you have any concept of life without oxygen.
Okay, so that no, okay. So it's interesting what you're saying. So we can tie it a little bit into so we did see the creation of ruach, of wind,
Right.
on day one, but then we were talking about these concepts of like a ruchnius wind and then a physical wind, and it could be right. It could be to say like the spiritual roots of wind are there, and maybe now their potential is going to be released, like with the right. There is no need per se of an atmosphere yet, right? Because if no one's utilizing it. And now this is part of the process. So it could be like the release, right, is going to be there in the plant life. And it's an interesting idea. One thing I want to point out, which is very fascinating, is just these words we've been throwing around. I want to analyze it a little bit. So what do we call something spiritual? We call it ruchnius. And what's that related to? It's related to ruach, wind. Right? So there's two connotations of that. There's a physical wind. So here, all around us, we've got air surrounding us, but can anybody see it? We can't see it, right? We can't see this air around us. It's there, all nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, all kinds of stuff floating around us, but we can't see it. So ruchnius is kind of giving us a sense of even physical wind, physical air, we can't quite see. Right? So the scientific theory on that is that all the atoms, all the molecules are spread farther apart. So it's more. So it gives us a little bit idea of ruchnius, right? Ruchnius is something that we can't really see. We can feel it sometimes, right? You can feel it. When can you feel it? When it's moving. Like when the air is moving, you can feel it. When it's still, you can't. But ruchnius is the word that has two connotations. So you can say the physical wind, the physical ruach, but it's also the spiritual. There's some kind of spiritual wind, right? Now, what do we use as the word for physical? We use the word gashmius, right? And what's interesting about it, where's that related to? That's related to geshem, right? So when something rain, it's related to rain. So if you think about it, even the physical process is very interesting. So we have this kind of spiritual or physical wind that we can't really see, and then when that starts to cool and come together, so then you have the hydrogen gas, the oxygen gas, it starts to cool and come together, and then it turns into water, and then it falls. So when it comes together, the ruchnius comes together, it becomes the geshem, it becomes the physical. And that gives us a great insight into the difference between the spiritual. So the spiritual, whatever, is more pure, refined, it's spread out beyond our being able to see it. But yet when it comes together, the more and more it comes together, then it becomes geshem, it becomes something physical. So when the spiritual comes together, it becomes something physical. And we see it even in the physical world. We see the physical wind can become the water. And then when you can go a step further, and then when you really start to press, those atoms and molecules tight together, then you start to get into something solid, right? And then you start to create something solid. Okay. So I don't have a lot for day 3. We're going to move on to day 4. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention while we're here. So the concept of bohu, we said that there's these giant rocks that give off water at the bottom of the ocean, and we do have. So I don't know if it's a spiritual concept, but there is a physical concept of this that we have, and we have these things at the bottom of the ocean, and they're called hydrothermal vents, and they give off this hot water and minerals inside them, and maybe this is the bohu, or at least a physical representation of the bohu that we're talking about, and that's the bohu. That means like in it, something in it. But there's water that comes out at the bottom of the ocean.
By the way, I think those vents are sulfuric acid or hydrogen sulfide, and there's animal forms that live down there on the sulfur rather than oxygen.
Yeah, no, right. So what's incredible is if the sunlight doesn't penetrate. I mean, this is not going to be. It will be way deep down in the ocean. But it's way deep down. The sun gets absorbed. It doesn't penetrate, so it's very dark, and you don't have the sunlight. And then this really supplies heat and nutrients. And then animals can live at the bottom of the ocean around these vents. So it gives life. So, I mean, it's a great example of Hashem's rachamim, His compassion, that Hashem, even at the bottom of this dark ocean, this cold, dark ocean, Hashem's giving heat and nutrients so animals can live around there.
Not only cold and dark,
Yeah.
but the atmospheric pressure is like 70 atmospheres.
And it's not pleasant.
It's not a tourist spot, no.
So that's a little glimpse of day 3.
Yeah.
I mean, once again, I mean, it's a very, ask a botanist. This is a very deep topic. Okay. Now we're going to get into the orbits, the planets, get into a little bit of that discussion. Once again, I don't want to get too deep into it because there's plenty to say on day 4, but we'll say some interesting things here. Okay. So day 4. Day 4 is placing the sun, the moon, basically the Mazalos, which is all the stars, all the galaxies, just everything up there. All the stars and galaxies. Okay, this is the zodiac. All right, so that is what is on day 4. And I'll give you a little bit of a glimpse into Rambam's model of his, what he calls the Galgalim. Let's see if we can get, so he's going to say that the Earth is the center. That's the center sphere. And then he's going to say then there's this next, what he calls it Galgalim. That's going to be too big for our purposes here. But there's going to be the next, there's going to be the sphere, and the sphere is made up, it's probably made up of spiritual, we talked about like spheres made of the infinite light, and these could be the sephiros themselves that are being called the Galgalim. But it's a sorry, my spheres are not going out so well today. But this sphere, I think the sphere itself would rotate around the Earth. And this sphere is going to rotate every 30 days or so. So this is going to be the Earth. And this is going to be the moon. And what he's saying here is that there's this kind of Rukniya sphere that you can't see. And that sphere itself is orbiting, that sphere is rotating. And Rambam explains in More Nevuchim and Guide for the Perplexed that there's malachim that are they're following Hashem's will, and they're making the sphere rotate, and then the moon is in that sphere rotating around. Now, you want to say, okay, wow, that's completely different from science. Science has completely thrown all that out, but there was a famous physicist named Albert Einstein, and his theories start to bring everything much back closer to this view of the universe. Because unlike Newton's theory of gravity, where Newton's saying that there's a force from the mass of the Earth, right, that's pulling everything to the center of the Earth, right, the way Einstein starts to describe gravity working is that gravity is bending, curving all time and space, and then things are orbiting in those bends, those curves of space. And they're not, I'm not going to say they're exactly the same. I'm not going to say the sphere is exactly the same. It's not. But Einstein's theory is getting science much closer to this view of the universe. Because now all of a sudden, if we have gravity working as basically curves or spheres of time and space, that's now much closer to these spheres, right? Now science and this is pulling much closer together. I don't want to get too far into that, but Einstein's theory does start to pull things more in that direction than a straight pull, as Newton's saying. Okay, so the first sphere out from the Earth would be where the moon is, and I don't know exactly how it all works. And then you get in the whole thing about the epicycles and the retrograde. I don't want to go too crazy and everything right now, but it would be that, right, the Earth's in this sphere. Maybe the sphere itself is being moved by the Malach that is, moving the sphere around according to Hashem's will. And this, as I said yesterday, this is closer to Aristotle's view of the universe. This is the ancient view, so the Greek scientist or philosopher Ptolemy, right? So his view was like this, so it was closer to that view. and and then gravity. I mean, I don't want to get too far into all the details, but you start getting into different views. Okay, so it'd be like that sphere. Now, what's interesting too is that a month, like we're July 31st, right? So this is where it starts getting all complicated, right? So okay, everything's moving in nice orbits, and then we can get into the whole circular, elliptical. I'm not going to go into that right now, but everything's moving in these nice orbits. But it should be really, we would expect it moving at the same rate. But the universe is not that easy, and sometimes we're watching planets, in the sky, and they're moving nice forward, and then they start to move back, and now we got to come up with theories of how that's all going. So it doesn't work nice as we expect, but there is something interesting that with the moon, and it's a little bit of how, but we know from Rosh Chodesh, how the Sanhedrin, when they would declare the Rosh Chodesh, that you could have a month that's 29 days or 30 days. So it does seem that there could be some change in the motion of how these spheres are rotating, that they could be rotating at slightly different rates according to how Hashem wants them to move. And also keep in remember that this was the very first mitzvah, the mitzvah Rosh Chodesh, of Mekadesh, sanctifying the month, making the month holy. Just as Shabbos makes the week holy, Rosh Chodesh makes the month holy. This, again, drives the Greeks crazy. Right? This is one of the sticking points. We got into the War of Hanukkah because they can't stand it. Creation drives them crazy, and holiness and physicality drives them crazy. But this was given to us. This is the cosmic clock. This was the special mitzvah that was given us to as a nation. It's making the month holy, and the Sanhedrin had the power to set the month. Okay, so according to that, the spheres, there could be change. There could be change in the motion. Okay. Also, I think it's very important that Hashem is specifically pointing out that he set all these orbits on day 4. That these orbits were placed and set on day 4. Everything was set on motion in day 4. And what's important about that is, I think any theory that has an idea of mikra, that it all just happened by chance, that planets just got caught up, in gravitational fields, everything's wandering around, just get caught up. There's a great order of precision. There's a spiritual flow, like the infinite light flows through the whole structure. And Hashem showing that on day 4, he set it all. And I think he's teaching us for a very specific reason. Hashem saying he created these orbits, he created the planets, he created the stars, and he set them on day 4, right? So there's nothing else happening. Okay, so then, according to this model, I believe the next one would be Mercury. Right, so this is going to work. This is now working differently than Copernicus's model, right? So, and I'll show you I'll show you real quick how Copernicus kind of flipped it. And then I believe the next thing out would be Venus. That's going to be in the next one of these spheres. Be Venus. Now, this is so even in this model. So what's interesting is both models don't change the distance of the sun and the earth, and that's important to note. So in this model, right, what's going to change is our distance to Mercury and Venus in this model, but our relationship and distance to the sun is going to be exactly the same. And I'll show you how Copernicus flipped Ptolemy's model in a second. Okay, so then it'll be there. Next one out, I'm going to run out of room. I always do this when I do. Next one out is Mars. And as I was saying, there is some compelling physical evidence of Mars's proximity to the sun by it being this hot desert planet. So that's interesting. I mean, the scientists want to say that it's cold desert, but I don't know.
Well, it's not hot in the nighttime.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't get. So then out would be like Saturn, and I'm gonna run. Oh, I'm running out of room. So that'll be Saturn. So, but I'll show you something very important. Sorry, Jupiter. Oh wait, no,
Saturn.
No, Saturn. Right, Saturn. We got Saturn here, and then Jupiter. Yeah, Saturn, Jupiter. No, I'm sorry. No, Saturn, Shabbosite. No, No, this is Jupiter because Saturn is the 7th.
Yes.
So this is Jupiter, and then Saturn. Yeah, so this is Jupiter. Okay, and then I have to erase a little bit to make the model a little bigger. This is Jupiter, and then the next one out, this is going to be Saturn, and this is, I'll just show you an easy way to remember it. Alright, so that's Saturn. Let me just erase this part so we can make our model bigger. Alright, so one thing that's very interesting about this model is that one thing that's fascinating about this model is if you wanted to maximize life in the universe, especially in the solar system, everything is now within 3, planet distances of the sun. So the greater potential of life is in this model because now everything, the proximity to the sun, is all in greater proportion. These are related to the days of the week, right? There's an influence that comes in the hours of the day, the hours of the night, but in the hours of the day. So even in the Roman calendar, like there's the spiritual flow flows through the first hour of the day on. You want to guess what day? The moon. Monday, right? And there's charts of all these things of the spiritual influences and the hours of the day, hours of the night. On Monday, the first hour of the day, I believe on Monday, the moon, the spiritual energy flows through the moon. Right, so then, right, Mercury, Venus, the names in Lashon HaKodesh, so this is called, it's called sometimes Levana, which means white, like this white shining light. It's related to the temple, it's related to the rise and fall of the Jewish people. The moon's also, I believe, called the Yareach, which is related to fire and month. So the moon has this aspect of the month. Mercury is, let's see, I believe that's called Kochav, which is very interesting. So the word for star itself, somehow Mercury has that quality of Kochav. It's the epitome of a star. These are called, in Lashon HaKodesh, they're called Kochav Leches, I think. They're called moving stars, which is interesting because planet, I forgot if it was Greek or Latin, but the word planet itself means like wanderer. It also, it has the same connotation of a wanderer. They wander through the sky, they wander through the Shemayim, they go in their orbits. Venus is called Noga, which means like a light. It emanates light. It also reflects a great amount of light. It's very bright. I think Venus, Noga, is called the morning star. It's very bright in the morning sky. So here, Noga would also make more sense in its great illumination of light being right next to the sun. Okay, Mars is, the sun's called Chama, heat, right? It's also Shemesh, but it's called in these terms, like of astrology, astronomy, it's called Chama, heat, because it's one of the life, the heat that's given off by the sun. The Mars is called, I think Adumim. I'm blanking on his name. It's related to Edom, red. It's redness. It's tied into like Gevurah that we talked about, war, bloodshed. Like the influence is coming through there. Right, they're all related to the days of the week. I forgot because in different languages, like Marday, I forgot which Wednesday. Right, it's like I don't know. They're all tied into the days of the week. So Mars, Jupiter, is called Sedek, which is interesting. So that's the sixth one out from us, and that's related to Sedek, judgment, court systems. Interesting. And then Saturn, easy to remember. So this is the seventh one out from us, and this is going to be vital in ours. And this is called Shabbosai. So this is related to Shabbos. It's the seventh one out from us, and it's Shabbosai is related to Shabbos. And it's interesting. The easy way to remember that it's called Shabbosai is it's the only planet with an Eruv. I guess there's Neptune too, but it has an Eruv all around it for Shabbos. It's got the rings. Neptune also is supposed to have rings. So then if we say, well, what's Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, right? And then Pluto is a very controversial planet, not a planet. Right? But that if we then look on the concept of the 10 spheros, so the 7 revealed lower spheros would relate to the 7 planets that are visible with the eye, right? And then what are the planets where you can't see with your eye that you needed a telescope? So then the 3 hidden planets relating to Kesser, Chakma, and Bina would be, the hidden ones, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, which we didn't find and discover until we had instruments. We had the telescope to see the hidden. So we talk about the physical and the spiritual. So there must be some kind of physicality that we can see it. There must be some kind of physical light emanating or the spiritual light coming from it becomes physical as it comes into the atmosphere. However it all works. Okay, so then
But Rebbe, you seem to be comfortable with the fact that we can see Mars and yet we don't get burnt up by the sun.
well, I mean, we didn't go into it so much with the atmosphere, but the atmosphere is this incredible creation by Hashem, and it filters out most of the harmful radiation as it's coming from different levels of the atmosphere. The atmosphere. So back to the theory that we've never been to the moon, which could be possible. I mean, there's a pasuk that says Haaretz nasan li b'nei Adam v'shamayim. Wait, v'shamayim nasan. I forgot the exact. I'm blanking the pasuk right now. But it's like the earth was given to people, but the Shemayim is for Hashem, right? Shemayim LaHashem, v'Haaretz nasan li b'nei Adam. That Shemayim is only in control of Hashem, by Hashem, and that the earth was people were given the ability to affect things that are happening on earth. So we had this incredible thing, the atmosphere, which Hashem created for us, and most of the harmful radiation is getting absorbed. So it could be quite difficult. I don't know. So if they did it or not do it, but it could be quite difficult that people could survive outside what's called the Van Allen belt when you're getting pure radiation from the sun. It could be very dangerous. So then outside of this, let's see, the eighth, there was one that may have been empty. So there's another Ikea, and then there's like the I forgot if it's empty now, but let's just say all the mazalos, like all the constellations, all the galaxies are here, right? So there's all the stars, all the galaxies. There may have been one that was open, I forgot. And then there's the outer one, which is called the daily one, which is very fascinating, and it spins the whole structure, right? The whole structure spins every day. So what Copernicus did is, this was the ancient model. This is the ancient model. So how the ancient model worked is, the Earth didn't move. Like the Haaretz Tola Blima, the Earth is just suspended on nothing. So either you believe that the Earth is suspended in space on nothing, or the people that hold by the piles of the turtles. Isn't it the turtles that go all the way down or something? I forgot how that all worked.
Turtles?
Yeah, the world suspended on the back of a turtle. And then the woman was speaking to a physicist, and he was like, and he thinks he's got her. He's like, but wait a second, you're saying if the Earth is all suspended on the back of the turtle, what's holding up the turtle? And the woman gets a smile on her face, and she's like, your scientists are so silly. It's turtles all the way down. It's like, it's all turtles. But the famous pasuk, like the Earth, Tola Blima, Haaretz Tola Blima. Like if you look at the views of the Earth from space, it's just floating there. It's just there. So a very famous experiment, the controversial experiment, because they didn't like the results, but great physicists Michelson and Morley had an experiment where they wanted to measure the speed of the Earth going through what they called the ether. I'm not going to get into all this at the time. The luciferous ether. But their experiment came back that the Earth wasn't moving. They didn't like that. They called it the controversial experiment, and then that led to like famous physicists like Lorentz and Einstein, like coming up with all kinds of wild math and twisting everything and getting the Earth to move. So is it moving? Is it not moving? I don't know. That's a discussion for another day. But Ptolemy, the ancient model, Rambam's model, has the Earth in the center. Maybe the Earth is not moving at all. Everything's orbiting the Earth. So in this case, if the sun, in the model where the sun's orbiting around the Earth, what would happen is the sun itself would be at this 23.5 degree elliptical. So like the sun wouldn't be orbiting like that. It would be orbiting like that, right, in that model. And so what Copernicus basically did is took this model and basically like popped the Earth out there, popped it there, put the sun in there, which you can do in a theoretical model. Only Hashem can do it in real life. But he switched it. So then in that model, to have all the calculations work out, so then in this model, the Earth is orbiting the 365.25 days. And then it's orbiting on that elliptical. But then to swap out the two, then he had to tilt the Earth that amount. Then he had to tilt the Earth at 23.5 degrees, or 23, whatever it is, that he tilts the Earth on that elliptical, and then has to incorporate the spin of the Earth. And then the spin of the Earth is to compensate for the spinning of the whole system. Okay, so I don't want to go too much into all this. It's a very interesting subject. What was I going to say? So, one interesting thing about Copernicus's model and Kepler's model, where he gets into elliptical orbits, is both of their theories were before Newton's theory of universal gravitation. So, if Kepler flips everything, right, and then you need gravity to make the whole system work. If the whole system is not these spheres being controlled by Malachim, according to the Ratzon of Hashem, to make the system work, you need. They didn't. When he flipped it, they didn't even have. I don't believe they had the theory of gravity yet, because Newton was after them. So what's interesting is I don't know how for Copernicus to get the system to work, he had to have the Earth spinning. But what's interesting is, when you throw gravity into the mix, everything starts getting kind of clunky, because then if you have the Earth is, then the sun's literally at the center of the universe, and then is the sun the gravitational pull, holding the whole universe together, everything starts getting clunky. Okay? So this I believe this is the system. This is the ancient system. This works well. We have the spheros being created. Like the spheros are spheres, spiritual spheres. The Galgalim, work very well with the Galgalim as spheros. Then these are divided into the 7, Rekiim. And then, as we say, this is just the known universe. This is just what we call Shemayim, what we can see through a telescope. And then there's heavenly, spiritual worlds beyond that, which we can't see.
What did the Gemara say about getting back, not talking about radiation, but the heat of the sun? We have an idea that the sun is extremely hot, and the time you get 93 million miles away, it becomes 68 degrees room temperature. So this is implying that it's not extremely hot, maybe a little hotter than the time you get to the Earth, it's 68 degrees Fahrenheit room temperature.
Well, there's something called.
The question I asked, did they ever have the idea, based on this theory, then they would say that Mercury that Mars is warm, and Jupiter is warm, and all these planets are warm as or even warmer than the Earth.
Oh, okay. So one thing. So we do have midrashim, and we do have very ancient Sfarim.
Yeah.
And I didn't prepare for this because this is not the main focus of what we're doing right now.
Right.
But it is interesting because we have information on each of the planets. If they're hot and dry, if they're cold and wet. But there is description, and those descriptions are not always going to. They're not perfectly aligned with what NASA is saying right now. So there's a machlokes, right? There's a big machlokes. Right, so Copernicus flips the model. So there's clunkiness in all some of these theories. Let me see. But one of the main important things is that, as we spoke with the spheros, and then considering that these Gagalim are spheros, there's spiritual energy. The infinite light is coming through each of these systems. So each month, let's say when the Masel's up, when this moves. What's very incredible is I believe this moves where the Mazalos are. There's another sphere where the stars are, and that's basically what's called the fixed stars. And that's I missed this sphere, but where the fixed stars are the galaxies. Those stars basically are called fixed. They don't move, but our tradition is that they move like very small distance every 70 years, like just incredibly small distance. And they're basically what the astrologers call fixed stars because they basically don't move in the sky. They're basically in the same position. But then where the Mazalos are, that moves. That's even though it's a sphere above that, it moves even quicker. And then the Mazalos are coordinating every month, where we're seeing the Mazel for the month. This system is so miraculous; it can only work with Hashem. But what's interesting is we are closer to the ancient Greeks on this system than sometimes the modern system. But yet, what I'm saying is that science is constantly changing, new theories, more information. And I do think, like, in some ways, Einstein took things away. But I think a lot of special relativity and general relativity is really bringing things back even closer. right? So it's not all resolved yet because we're talking about the difference of us receiving the information from Hashem versus the scientists that are just analyzing what they can see and determine without having the component of the spiritual element that they can't really, research or put into the theories right now. So it's very interesting. I mean, it's a great topic. If Copernicus is wrong, which he may be, it really has destroyed. I mean, I think that was one of the acts that really destroyed Amunah of the world. Because instead of this, where everything has relevance, everything, Hashem's like what's called astrology, right? Astrology was the old system where it's like they're charting all this and they're trying to calculate the spiritual effect and the flow. But the modern astronomy really stripped all meaning out of space, stripped all meaning out of the spiritual influence coming through all this, and it's just scientific data. It just becomes scientific data. They're recording through like the telescopes and a spectrometer, and just whatever other devices they're using to record data. But they really stripped all spiritual meaning out of the universe.
So why is, if it was this, what we say the sequence according to modern idea, how does that just strip the spiritual? We still have the outer spheres and everything. Why is it a challenge to it?
No, because astronomy is not interested in like if Jupiter's here in the sky in this month on this day at this time, what's the spiritual energy coming into the world? They don't care about that at all. They just want to know what elements are on this planet, what do we see in the star, what's moving. You know what I'm saying? It's just raw data. They're just concerned with raw data, and not any spiritual.
What
meaning.
is the background of the Maaseh in constellations?
So Mazel's relate to the zodiac. The word Mazel itself actually means flow. And it's talking about this spiritual flow that's coming. So when the spiritual flow, like right now, I said we're in the month of Av. It's the month of the Aryeh, Leo the lion, and that's related to the Beis HaMikdash. So that month has a great relationship to the Beis HaMikdash. So big things happen with the Beis HaMikdash in the month of Av. And then Av, right now, Av and Tammuz are considered months right now. Part of Av, because we get control of Av, after Tu B'Av. Tu B'Av we get control, but through Tammuz, starting on the 17th of Tammuz, and then to the 9th of Av, those mazals, even though generally we're above the mazals through the Torah, because we're beyond this whole system because we go right up to the top. But it's considered that those months are given over to Asa right now. Asa has control over those months. Asa should never have control over a month. That was the very first mitzvah we were given at Rosh Chodesh. Hashem gave us the cosmic, clock to be ours, to use. But Asa got control over that, and then the month of Tevis. Some of the month of Tevis, right now, Asa also controls like that month. That's why we have the 10th of Tevis. And right, it's like, I think the 8th of Tevis is when the Torah was translated into Greek, Ptolemy, and that's when we lost control of the Torah, and then other nations can say what they tell us what the Torah means, right? That's hilarious. And then the 9th of Av, they think that's when, the 9th of Tevis, that they believe that's the day JC was born. Born on the same day that Ezra died. Ezra was Nifter, and that was the end of Nevuah. That's where we lost contact. That's where we lost direct contact with Hashem through Nevuah. And then the 10th of Tevis, the beginning of the siege, of Tisha B'Av. And then it was the day, interesting enough, if you look in the Megillah Esther, the 10th of Tevis is the day that Esther is captured by Achashverosh, brought into Achashverosh's harem. And but it's a dark day, but it's the beginning of the process of the whole Geula. Mm-hmm. So in all these months, so in the month of Tammuz, so really one last thing to just wrap it all up. So the 17th of Tammuz was supposed to be the day we received the Luchos, the first set of the sapphire tablets. It's supposed to be a Yom Tov. Aaron, a Kohen, said, I'm building a Mizbeach Chag for Hashem. Like this is a Yom Tov for Hashem. That's the day it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a day of great celebration. And then Bezrat Hashem, Tisha B'Av, supposed to be the first day that we came into Eretz Yisrael as a nation. The first day we begin the process of inheriting Eretz Yisrael. So that's supposed to be, we have Yom Yerushalayim now, but it's really like the Yom Eretz Yisrael. It's supposed to be the great Chag for the land of Israel. So the 9th of Av is going to turn into this great celebration of the land of Israel and the Beis HaMikdash. And instead of the 3 weeks of mourning, Bezrat Hashem, we see Mashiach come quickly. This is going to be the 3 weeks of the great celebration from one Yom Tov to the next Yom Tov in the summer. Okay, that's all for today.
Let's go.
Okay.